Okay, let's imagine for a second if Aragorn had a cousin who was part warrior, part royal heartthrob, and just a little too into medieval CrossFit. You've got Boromir. Boromir is the eldest son of Denethor II, who's basically a brooding steward king type who probably listens to sad playlists on repeat, and Finduilas, his mum, who did sadly pass away when he was young. He was the older brother of Faramir, kind, thoughtful, and bookish, basically the Samwise to Boromir's jockey of Frodo. Boromir was Dad's favourite. Faramir fans, we know the pain. Partly because he looked like Denethor and shared his pride, but other than that, they were like night and day. While Denethor sat around doom-scrolling Palantir Twitter, Boromir was out there training with swords and yelling for Gondor at squirrels. Now forget romance, Boromir, he didn't have time for dating apps. He was all about battles and glory and ancient war stories. Think of him like a history buff who skips the lectures and just wants to reenact the sword fights. He was strong, he was handsome, he had major noble energy, he had dark hair, grey eyes, a serious stare. If this were a fantasy boy band, he'd be that brooding frontman with the epic shoulder armour. Now, Boromir, he joined the Fellowship of the Ring, the Middle-earth equivalent of the Avengers, but with more walking and way less spandex and rubbish jokes. There were 9 members, and Boromir was the tank of the group. Think big, brave, always ready to protect his squad. Now, here's the spoiler, he dies. I'm just going in there. He dies fighting off the Uruk-hai, trying to save Merry and Pippin, who are like the Fellowship's comic relief hobbit duo. His death marked the moment the Fellowship sort of broke up, like the Beatles, but with more swords and less Yoko. Now, if we look at his history, we'll rewind way back to when he is just a youngling. Boromir, the brother with a big sword, literal sword, and even bigger heart. This is not going to be... Let's rewind that Middle-earth timeline a little bit. Now, Boromir was born in Tolkien time, a very, very long time ago. His little brother Faramir, he came along 5 years later. Honestly, their sibling bond, it was like chef's kiss. Think Thor and Loki, but if Loki never turned evil and the two of them just had this really cool bromance instead. From the start, Boromir, he played the role of big bro, protector like a champ. He had the muscles, the bravery, the I'll punch the orc that messes with you energy, but sadly, he was just 10 when his mum Finduilas passed away, which was a major blow to both brothers. Now, after that, Denethor, their dad, basically switched to just full-time brooding mode, kind of like a mashup of Snape and Batman and that moody philosophy professor. Now, Boromir, he didn't turn inward like his dad. Instead, he went full action hero. He grew up to be a military powerhouse, loving weapons, war stories, old school Gondorian glory. Basically, if you needed someone to lead the charge or dramatically yell, "Hold the line!" in battle, he was your guy. The dream that launched the quest, aka Middle-earth's most mysterious voicemail. Now, just before things got extra spicy in Middle-earth, Faramir, he started having these cryptic dreams literally on repeat. Now, if you imagine a medieval version of You've Got Mail, but more like seek for the sword that was broken, yada yada yada, Isildur's bane, blah 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 blah, in Imaldris it dwells. Anyway, totally normal sleep talk. Now, eventually Boromir, he then has the dream too. One, because of course, the overachieving brother only needed one dream, but both brothers, they were kind of like, what is this dream? What does this mean? And they took it to Denethor, because as you do, let's go ask Dad, shall we? Who, he knew a lot, but he wasn't exactly the elven Google they hoped for, right? All he could tell them was that Rivendell, aka Imaldris, was this super chill, elven spa retreat kind of thing, part of the north, home to Lord Elrond, who was basically Middle-earth's Gandalf-adjacent elf dad with a PhD in destiny. And that dream, spoiler, it was the cosmic nudge that sent Boromir off to Rivendell, setting him on the path to joining the Fellowship. But before he left, we have to activate his hero mode, right? Just as the War of the Ring was kicking off. If you're completely new, it's a big main event of the whole saga. Sauron, who's the big fiery eye guy, he launched an attack on Osgiliath, which is like a key city of Gondor's front lines. Boromir, already in full commander mode, think Aragorn meets Captain America. He led his troops like a total boss. He held off the invading orcs, and when things got dicey, he destroyed the last bridge so the bad guys couldn't cross. It's a classic blow up the bridge behind you action movie moment. And yes, he survived. That was Boromir at his finest. He's brave, he's bold, and he's always putting his people first. But little did he know, the real battle was waiting for him at Rivendell, and then beyond. Now then, we'll break down his journey to Rivendell slightly. He's kind of got this big road trip, right? One brother, one dream, one seriously bad idea. So if we remember that cryptic, mystical dream message that both brothers had about the broken swords, the doom objects, the places with names like Imaldris, and they're like, what the hell's going on? And Dad's like, it's all about Rivendell. Faramir was all ready to pack his bags, bring snacks, make the trek to Rivendell, but Boromir was kind of in his peak big brother protective mode and was like, hold up. I can't do it in Sean Bean's voice, can I? No. It's dangerous, it's confusing, probably full of spiders, so I'll go. Basically, he did the classic superhero move, took the hit so that his little brother wouldn't have to. A 110-day hike awaits him. Eat your heart out, Frodo. Boromir's journey from Gondor to Rivendell was not your average Sunday stroll. 110 days of hard travel through rough terrain, zero working GPS, obviously, and he went through the Gap of Rohan, which is Middle-earth's scenic shortcut. He headed north along the Misty Mountains, and then he discovered the old roads were not so much roads anymore as vague suggestions of where a road used to be. Now picture this. Boromir's trudging along crumbled causeways, crossing rivers at shady, ruined bridges, and dealing with total road trip chaos at this point. And at one point, near Tharbad, he had to cross the Grey Flood River. Think the Oregon Trail, but with fewer oxen and more doom. And in the process, he loses his horse. The horse was smart, and it noped it straight back to Rohan, while Boromir hoofed it the rest of the way on foot like the absolute legend that he was. Now, this brings us to the Council of Elrond, which is like Middle-earth's most intense Zoom call. So when Boromir finally reaches Rivendell, which is like Elf HQ, he walked into the Council of Elrond, which is like a gathering of elves, dwarves, men, wizards, a couple of confused hobbits. It was like the Avengers assembling, but with more beards and fewer snarky quips. Each person, they laid out what was going on in their corner of Middle-earth. Now, Boromir, he spoke on behalf of Gondor, telling everyone just how hard his people were fighting to keep Mordor's forces from bursting through the borders like unwanted party crashers. But plot twist, Boromir wasn't there asking for backup. He actually came seeking answers, not armies. Then boom, the riddles from the dream start falling into place like pieces in a puzzle. Aragorn whips out the shards of Narsil, aka the famous broken sword from his dream, very shiny, very significant. Frodo, our brave hobbit, MVP, holds up the One Ring like woohoo, aka Isildur's Bane, the most dangerous piece of jewellery in fantasy history. Boromir sees the ring, and he gets this light bulb moment. Not in a good way. He suggested using it to defend Gondor, arguing that maybe the weapon of the enemy could be turned against him. You know, like, hey, Sauron's ring's so powerful, why not use it to win? Elrond, wise elf lord and full-time buzzkill, in a good way though, was like, absolutely not, Boromir, mate. That thing corrupts everyone. You know that, right? You try to use it for good, it's just going to twist you into a walking disaster. With a very dark Instagram filter. So yeah, the first signs of Boromir's inner conflict at this point are starting to creep out, right? The ring's power is already tempting, especially for someone with such a strong sense of duty and pride and a desperate desire to save his people. Even the good guys can be vulnerable, and this, it was kind of just the beginning. This leads us now to the Fellowship of the Ring. So Boromir's on the road, right? We've got kind of like blizzards and Balrogs and one very bad temptation. So here's the thing about Boromir. He didn't join the Fellowship just for the sightseeing and the elf snacks. His mission was to get back to Gondor, preferably with some helpful tips on how to not get crushed by Mordor, Volume 1. That's why when the Fellowship set out, Boromir was kind of laser focused on bringing that shiny, terrifying ring home. We've got blizzards and, what should we call it, buff bros. The Caradhras Cold Snap. The first big hurdle was the Redhorn Pass over Caradhras, which sounds majestic, but it's actually a frozen nightmare. Fortunately, Boromir, ever the practical warrior dad of the group, said, hey, let's each carry a bundle of firewood, just trust me on this one. And this literally saved everyone's toes. When a blizzard hit and they got snowed in like a fantasy version of The Shining, they had firewood ready. Survival hack, always listen to the guy carrying a sword bigger than your torso. Then when the snow got way too real, Boromir and Aragorn did what can only be described as like a heroic buddy workout montage. They ploughed through chest-deep snow, picked up all 4 hobbits like sleepy puppies, and they carried them down the mountain. 10 out of 10. Would watch that training montage with a dramatic violin music any day of the week. Now we've got Moria versus literally anywhere else. With the mountain pass blocked, Boromir reasonably suggests plan B. Guys, let's go south through the Gap of Rohan or the chill beach towns of Lebanon, or we'll avoid the mountain lairs, right? And maybe just catch some sun on the way. What do you think, boys? Gandalf, though, is like, nah, no way, lads. Though those lands are crawling with bad guys now. Thanks, Saruman. Instead, what about this, boys? We'll go through the mines of Moria. Cue Boromir's... What? What now? He was not about that underground dungeon life. In fact, he said he'd only go if literally everyone else voted for it. Spoiler, they did. Mistakes were made. Enter the Watcher in the water. So when they got to the doors of Durin, which is like Moria's front porch, Gandalf has his brain fart and forgets the password, and Boromir's getting like a bit fed up, and he threw a stone into the ominous lake nearby because he's like, forget this now, which is basically the Middle-earth equivalent of kicking a cursed vending machine. It was a bad move. The splash woke up the Watcher in the water, who's a tentacled beast who clearly didn't appreciate being disturbed by Boromir's stone skipping, and it attacked and then snatched at Frodo, and the Fellowship had to scramble into Moria like guests fleeing a very aggressive Airbnb host. Deep into the dwarven dark, Boromir, we've got Balrogs, we've got bighorn energy. Now inside Moria, things got intense. The company was attacked by the chamber of the Mazarbul, and Boromir was right in the thick of it. He's blocking doors, he's slashing monsters, and he's going full tank mode against a cave troll, yes? Kind of like that cave troll from the movie. He almost stole the scene from Legolas, and that's saying something. Now, as they reached the bridge of Khazad-dûm, the boss fight began. Orcs are swarming, and with them came a Balrog. Now, basically a fire demon with wings, horns, and serious anger management issues. Boromir blew his great horn, which is like a fantasy air horn, but more majestic, which made the orcs hesitate for a hot second until they realised help wasn't coming. The battle raged on, and just as Gandalf squared up against the Balrog, Boromir and Aragorn, they ran to help, but just missed the showdown. Gandalf pulled the dramatic, "You shall not pass," shattered the bridge and fell into the abyss with the flaming nightmare creature. Exit wizard stage left. Into Lothlorien, the elf, magic and suspicious woods. Now, after Gandalf's fall, Aragorn took charge, and the company made for Lothlorien, which is like the glittery forest realm of Galadriel, Middle-earth's ethereal elf queen and part-time telepath. Boromir's like, this forest looks a bit sketchy, boys. People go in there, right, and they don't come out? Aragorn, he reassured him that only those carrying darkness had reason to fear Lothlorien. Basically, if your soul's not corrupted, we're all good. Now, inside the forest, Galadriel, she pulled a surprise psychic group chat with each member. And what she told Boromir, he never said. But let's just say it kind of got under his skin. Now, when they left, Galadriel gave them gifts. Boromir got a golden belt. It was kind of stylish and simple, and it was definitely symbolic. The kind of accessory you'd only get from a queen who knows your true destiny. Now we've got the river road trip and the ring trouble. The company, they continued down the Anduin River, and Boromir, he shared a boat with Merry and Pippin, but something was kind of off. The ring was working its dark magic, whispering in Boromir's ear like Gollum doing ASMR. He started muttering to himself, biting his nails, eyeing Frodo's boat, and genuinely giving off that guy in a thriller movie about to snap kind of vibes. Even the hobbits were like, should we be worried? He's kind of chomping on his fingers a bit. To his credit, Boromir still had moments of clarity. When they approached the rapids at San Gabir, he was the one who noticed in time and warned others, possibly saving them from becoming Middle-earth river debris. Still, he kept suggesting they ditch the boats, head west and go to Gondor, because deep down he was still thinking, if I had that ring, maybe I could save everyone. Frodo wasn't feeling that plan. The tension was building, the road ahead was darker than ever, and for Boromir, his greatest test was yet to come. And this brings us to the breaking of the Fellowship. We've kind of got the fall and the rise of Boromir. Think of it as tragedy, redemption, and a Viking level send-off. So by the time the Fellowship reached Nen Hithoel, which is like a fancy lake with dramatic vibes, they're kind of done. They're tired, they're anxious, and honestly, probably in need of couples therapy. It was decision time. Where are we going next, boys? Are we going to Mordor? Are we going to hit up Gondor? Back to Hobbiton for some second breakfast? What are we feeling? What's the vibe here? Frodo, bearing the literal weight of evil jewellery, he took a moment, slipped off into the woods to clear his head. He's like, oh, this is getting a bit much for me now. Boromir was spiralling at this point. The ring had been whispering to him like the worst kind of toxic influencer. Take me. Use me. You could save Gondor and look amazing doing it, Boromir. So Boromir followed Frodo. He meant to talk, maybe persuade, but the ring had other ideas as he spoke. You could literally see it in his eyes, the dream of power, the being a hero king who topples Sauron, saves the world, and then gets his own dramatic statue in Gondor. Frodo's like, Boromir, bro, no. And then Boromir snapped. He tried to take the ring by force, in full panic mode, and it wasn't evil, it just a desperate, broken man grasping at hope and just at the wrong place, wrong time. Frodo then gets scared, he's terrified, he puts the ring on, and he just vanishes, as we know, like a ghost. Now that moment hit Boromir like a mountain of guilt. He realised what he'd done. And it broke him. He started to cry, he wept, he called out for Frodo, but it was too late. The damage had been done, and that's where it brings us to like the final stand, Boromir. Let's call him the protector at this point. When he returns to the others, he didn't tell the full story. He was just like, oh, me and Frodo had a bit of a row back there. And he's gone off in a strop, basically, boys. And then when Merry and Pippin ran off to search for him, Aragorn told Boromir to follow and protect them. And this is where Boromir became the hero he always wanted to be. Not with the ring, not with power, but by doing the most noble thing of all, sacrificing himself to save others. He found the hobbits surrounded by orcs, and he fought like an army of one. He cut down every enemy after enemy after enemy, turning into the Gondorian version of a last stand action hero. He even managed to scare the remaining orcs off, but it wasn't over. A second wave came, over 100 strong. Boromir sounded the great horn, rallying one last defiance. He stood between Merry, Pippin, and certain death, taking arrow after arrow, and still he fought. Still he would not fall. He was hit again and again, but he refused to die until there was nothing more that he could do. And eventually he collapsed and the orcs took the hobbits. And then we've got his redemption and a farewell. Now, while Aragorn found him, it was almost too late, but Boromir was still alive, surrounded by a pile of at least 20 slain orcs. His sword was broken, his great horn shattered in two, and in his final moments he told the truth. He confessed to Aragorn about what he'd done to Frodo, that he'd tried to take the ring, but he also asked for forgiveness. Now Aragorn knelt beside him and he said, "You are forgiven. You have conquered. Few have done as you have." Now those words gave Boromir peace. He died not as a failed hero, but as a man redeemed. Then the remaining fellowship gave him a farewell just worthy of a king. They laid him in a boat. His broken sword and horn was placed on his lap. The weapons of the enemies he'd slain were set at his feet. Aragorn and Legolas, they sang the Song of Boromir as they pushed the boat out onto the River Anduin. And it was a funeral straight out of like a Viking legend, full of honour and sorrow and grief. And then 3 nights later, Faramir, Boromir's beloved little brother, sat beside the same river at Osgiliath, and he saw a vision. Or maybe it was real, I don't know. A ghostly boat drifted by, carrying Boromir's body. The horn was gone, broken. The bond between brothers, they remained unbroken. Eventually, the 2 halves of the great horn washed ashore, returned to Denethor, who realised what had happened. Boromir's final act had not been in vain. The boat was said to have travelled down the Anduin and into the sea. A fitting end, I think, for a fallen warrior, not for power, but for love. So to summarise it, I've put this in timestamps hopefully by now, so if you wanted to skip all of that and you just want a really simple summary, who's Boromir? He's the eldest son of Denethor, proud captain of Gondor, big brother to soft-hearted Faramir. He looks like he walked off the cover of Middle-earth's Men's Fitness. Why did he join the Fellowship? Well, he had a weird prophetic dream shared with Faramir, and then he went on a 100-day 10 solo hike to Rivendell. He wanted to find answers and maybe take the ring back to Gondor to help fight Sauron. His travel highlights. We've got his downfall. The ring starts whispering bad ideas. Boromir begins to obsess. If I had it, I could save my people, yada, yada, yada. He then makes a big mistake. He tries to take the ring from Frodo. Frodo escapes. Boromir immediately realises he's messed up, cues his ugly crying and regret. He sacrifices himself, defending Merry and Pippin from an army of orcs. He takes many arrows, many, many, many arrows. He keeps fighting. He dies a hero. And then he confesses his mistakes to Aragorn. He's forgiven. He possibly has the most epic funeral in Middle-earth, Viking-style boat, sent off with sword and song and shattered honour, made whole again. And then finally Faramir sees his ghost boat. Denethor gets the broken horn. Everyone agrees Boromir may have fallen, but rose in glory. And he's a tragic hero, a bit too proud, totally human, and he went out swinging. But now it's time to discuss him. Let's break him down slightly. You've probably seen it floating around the internet, maybe in a Reddit comment section, maybe in a YouTube video titled something like Why Modern Fantasy is Better Than Tolkien. It's a bold claim, my friend. The take goes like this. The Lord of the Rings is just a classic good versus evil tale. The goodies are all angelic and the baddies are basically walking trash fires, and there's no juicy moral ambiguity like you get in modern fantasy. Now, some people mean this as a diss. They really dislike the Tolkien community. Some mean it as a compliment. But either way, this take totally just misses the mark. And it shows they might not know Tolkien as well as they think. Because guess what? The whole good with a capital G versus evil with a capital E idea is not only overly simplistic. Tolkien himself calls it out in his letters. So, Tolkien, dad of modern fantasy, saw this take popping up in the very early reviews of The Lord of the Rings back when it first came out. So we're talking like 1950s era book club drama, probably way more brutal than Reddit is today. And he didn't just roll his eyes and move on. He actually wrote back and he explained why that take totally misses the point. In one of his letters, think of his letters as like Tolkien's extended FAQs for confused readers, right? He basically says this. He says, sure, you've got your big bad guy like Sauron and your eye in the sky, Dark Lord. He's doing all the evil things, right? But this isn't a fairy tale where the good guys are perfect and the villains twirl their moustaches and laugh evilly. And he's right. The world of The Lord of the Rings, it isn't painted in simple black and white. It's full of characters wrestling with tough choices, inner doubts and messy motivations. So before we throw Tolkien into the not enough moral complexity bin, we take a closer look because once you kind of peel back that elf glow and the orc smashing, you find a story that's just way deeper than your average good versus evil throwdown. In fact, if we dive into Tolkien's most fascinating, not so black and white characters to prove a point, we bring ourselves to Boromir. Brave, warrior, flawed, hero, walking example of how Tolkien's world is anything but morally simple. And if we want to keep going, we can also call some key witnesses, looking at you, Aragorn, and Faramir and Gandalf to help plead Boromir's case. So grab your lembas snack now, pour yourself a cup of tea. This is about to get interesting for the final part of this video because I'm going to reference letter 154. Now, somewhere he writes as follows. Some reviewers have called the whole thing simple-minded, just a plain fight between good and evil, with all the good just good, and the bad just bad. Pardonable, perhaps, though at least Boromir has been overlooked. In people, in a hurry, and with only a fragment to read, and of course without the earlier written but unpublished elvish histories. But the elves are not wholly good or in the right, not so much because they had flirted with Sauron as because, with or without his assistance, they were embalmers. They wanted to have their cake and eat it, to live in the moral, historical Middle-earth because they had become fond of it, and so tried to stop its change and history, stop its growth, keep it as pleasaunce as even largely a desert, where they could be artists, and they were overburdened with sadness and nostalgic regret. In their way, the men of Gondor were similar. A withering people whose only hollows were their tombs, but in any case, this is a tale about a war, and if war is allowed, at least as a topic and a setting, it is not much good complaining that all the people on one side are against those on the other. Not that I have made even this issue quite so simple. There are Saruman and Denethor and Boromir, and there are treacheries and strife even among the orcs. So yeah, Tolkien, he wasn't just vaguely aware that people were just out there calling The Lord of the Rings a simple good versus evil story. He directly addressed it himself in another one of his letters. He says that some reviewers described the story as simple-minded, which implied that they were saying the good guys were just being good and the bad guys were just being bad, and Tolkien's response was quite literally, hold my bloody pipe, I'm coming. He immediately drops this list of receipts to show that it's just way more complicated than that. And first up, like I mentioned, or like we've been talking about this whole bloody time, Boromir, the brave but flawed hero whose moral struggle is the whole entire point. And then Tolkien continues to dig into the elves, who, despite looking like they stepped out of a Pinterest board for glowing forest gods, have their own messy motives. They weren't just noble and pure. Tolkien literally calls them embalmers, meaning they wanted to freeze Middle-earth in time, like a fantasy version of that one friend who refuses to stop talking about their high school glory days, right? He then compares the elves to the men of Gondor, calling them a withering people whose only hallows were their tombs. And translation, these guys were so obsessed with the past, they were basically living in a museum of themselves. Oh, and if you thought the orcs were just generic video game badass characters, Tolkien even hints that they have layers. Yes, Shrek, looking at you, even the angry cannon fodder goblin guys might have more going on than you didn't expect. So we should be giving Rings of Power a little bit of slack. Yes, the debate has deeper roots than you'd think. He wraps it up with a spicy list of morally messy characters like Saruman, the fallen wizard, corporate sellout, Denethor, Gondor's tragic hot mess of a steward, Boromir again, and the orcs. This is like the Middle-earth Avengers, Dark Side Edition. There's so much to unpack here. If you only know the elves from Peter Jackson movies, all flowing robes and slow-motion stares, you might be shocked to hear that Tolkien himself say that they weren't always right or even always good. Though, let's be honest, anyone who's read the Silmarillion is nodding like, yeah, that pretty much tracks. We could easily spend an entire deep dive just on the Gondor tomb comment, and we probably should. Or the orcs, or the messy parallels between Saruman, Denethor and Boromir. That would be a cool video. The tragic trio of smart people who make terrible decisions under pressure. But for now, zero in on one character, the character Tolkien specifically name drops twice in that letter, Boromir. As we've discussed in this video, he is one of Tolkien's most tragic heroes. He's a top-tier captain, he's beloved in Gondor, he's basically fantasy Captain America with daddy issues, and he follows a prophetic dream, right? To Rivendell, he joins the Fellowship, and then he's all about, trying to save Gondor from getting steamrolled by Sauron. Now, the tension is the heart of Boromir's story. I think the further they travel, the more it sinks in. Frodo is not going to Gondor, my guy. Frodo intends to take the ring straight to the enemy territory and destroy it, rather than use it as a weapon. Now, Boromir's reaction, as we've talked about, is pure panic and desperation. He tries to reason with Frodo. Hey, maybe just borrow the ring for a bit, my guy. I can use it. I'll give it back. Just a little ring time. Frodo's like, nope, absolutely not. And that's when the big mistake happens. He snaps, he tries to take the ring by force, which, for the record, is just a huge no in Tolkien's world. Now, the ring has its way of twisting good intentions faster than you can say power corrupts. Now, Frodo escapes, and Boromir, in a classic immediate regret fashion, realises what he's done. Probably didn't help that a falling branch clocked him in the head. Not long after the Fellowship is attacked by orcs, Boromir dies defending Merry and Pippin. We know how the rest goes, right? He doesn't just swing his sword, he makes a stand. The moment he chooses to protect, not conquer, to sacrifice, not seize. And it's in, I guess, that final heartbreaking stand that we see the real depth to his character, right? And why Tolkien highlights him as Exhibit A. In the case for moral complexity in Middle-earth, if we really kind of zone in on his death, it goes like this. They have gone, the halflings. The orcs have taken them. I think they are not dead. Orcs bound them. He paused and his eyes closed wearily. After a moment he spoke again. Farewell, Aragorn. Go to Minas Tirith and save my people. I have failed. When Boromir lay dying, he really thought he'd messed everything up. And not just a little. We're talking series finale of his own life levels of guilt. If we break down his personal failure checklist, because in his eyes, it was long and painful. He didn't save his people in Gondor, and now that he's gone, they've lost their one strong defender. He didn't bring them the ring, the one weapon that might have turned the tide against Sauron, aka Big Red Fiery Eyeball Boss. He tried to take the ring from Frodo by force, which is Middle-earth equivalent of betraying your best friend during a group project and stealing the one MacBook that has the entire PowerPoint. He gave in to the ring's temptation, and not just looked at it for too long. He was fully spiralling, fantasizing about becoming a great king and saviour, and maybe worst of all in his mind, he failed to protect Merry and Pippin, the two smallest members of the team, the ones who trusted him the most. The last one probably stings the most, not just because it was sad, though it was, but because it was his shot at redemption. He wasn't just swinging his sword around like some action movie hero. He was, in those moments, trying to make things right. Now, after what happened with Frodo, he put everything he had into defending Merry and Pippin from a horde of angry orcs. This wasn't just about honour and duty. It was personal. It was penance. In those final moments, Boromir, he wasn't trying to win. He was trying to redeem himself, to prove, even as the ring's shadow closed in, that he could still choose to do the right thing. And yeah, he got overwhelmed, he fell, but not before fighting like a lion to protect those hobbits. In the end, Boromir thought he had failed, but what he didn't know, and what we know, is that he actually became something far more powerful than a ring bearer or a war hero. He became a symbol of what it means to fall and then rise again, to stumble and still choose courage. In another letter, 131, Tolkien writes, "The book, Book 2, ends with the death of Boromir fighting the orcs in an effort to redeem himself for his fall. He had tried to take the ring from Frodo by force. So when Boromir says, 'I have failed,' with his last breath, you can feel the weight of it. It's not just a sad line, it's a heartbreak emoji wrapped in chainmail, and it means a lot of things. He knows he's messed up with Frodo. He knows he gave in to the temptation of the One Ring. He knows he couldn't stop the orcs from taking Merry and Pippin. So yeah, he's having what you might call a full-blown existential crisis at the worst possible moment. But here is the question, right? Was he right? Did Boromir totally, irredeemably, capital F, fail? Was he beyond hope? Just another fallen man corrupted by power? If Tolkien had been writing a more basic kind of fantasy, you know, the kind where the good guys sparkle and the bad guys hiss and there's no room for nuance, then yes, Boromir's fall might have been the end of the story. He'd go down as that guy who couldn't handle the ring and then get written off with the villains. But Tolkien isn't interested, and wasn't interested, I should say, in moral colouring books. Because The Lord of the Rings is not a straightforward tale of team good versus evil. It's a story about how hard it is to stay good, and what it means to fight your way back when you fall. Boromir is not evil, he's human. He's deeply, painfully, wonderfully human. He wants to protect his people, he wants to be the hero, but he also starts to lose sight of what true heroism really looks like. Yes, he did fail, but no, that's not where his story ends. In fact, Tolkien uses Boromir to show something far more powerful than a guy who never stumbles. He shows us a man who stumbles hard and then gives his life trying to stand back up. Boromir's fall is tragic, but his redemption is real. Tolkien doesn't leave us guessing. He gives us 3 clear moments where Boromir's return to grace is acknowledged, it's honoured, and it's even mourned. So now let's do what any good defence lawyer in Middle-earth would do. Let's call our 3-star witnesses to the stand. We have Aragorn, the Ranger King, Faramir, the little brother with big feels, and Gandalf, the wizard who sees through everyone's soul, and see how they remember Boromir, because this man may have fallen, but Tolkien makes sure we never forget how hard he fought to rise again, and through those characters his story does live on. So after all of this, what have we learned? If you're still here by now, Boromir, not just a warrior, not just a tragic figure, not just the guy from the meme who said wanders not simply walk into Mordor, you know how it goes, and immediately became internet famous for life. He's more than a meme, more than his mistakes. He's a fully realised, emotionally messy, noble-hearted, dad energy-having, elf-skeptical, orc-slaying human character who reminds us that being heroic isn't about being flawless, it's about what you do after you fall. Boromir shows us, I guess, that failure doesn't have to erase your worth, that redemption is real, and yes, it is okay to bite your nails, yell at rivers, and dramatically blow a horn while fending off 100 orcs. if you're trying to save your hobbit friends. So whether you're Team Aragorn, Team Faramir, or just Team I cry every time I see a funeral boat, let's raise a goblet or a flagon of Miruvor to Boromir of Gondor, the man, the myth, the meme, the hero who fell, but he did not fall alone. And if you made it this far, congratulations, you are now officially qualified for the I understand Boromir was robbed support group. Meetings are held emotionally in our hearts forever. I'm only going to employ you one time to please do all those things you need to do to support my tiny channel, and I hope to see you, fingers crossed, in the next video.